Today's debate on highly protected marine areas is a rare opportunity for the Parliament to agree on something. We should all agree on standing up for coastal and fishing communities. Last month, the First Minister outlined his priorities for Scotland. He spoke for almost half an hour. He failed to mention fishing or farming once. However, it is never too late to start listening, admit your mistakes and go back to the drawing board. In opening this debate, I appeal directly to SNP MSPs representing coastal communities and to other colleagues who want to see Scottish fishing thrive in the future. Anyone who rigidly follows the party line when they know the damage that these plans could do will owe an explanation to their constituents, Scotland's fishing industry and coastal and rural communities. This is not about siding with me and my colleagues on these benches. It's about siding with the Scottish fishing industry. We should be proud of this industry, which contributes over £500 million worth to our economy each year. On top of the challenges that they are already facing with spatial squeeze, they are contending with a fishing ban that threatens to destroy their livelihoods for good. It is clear to them, as it is to us, the proposed fishing ban goes too far with too little evidence. And we know how this came about on a dark day in a dishonourable agreement signed in August 2021. Mary McCallan's amendment today shows that this government is not only failing to listen to the concerns of our fishermen and coastal communities, but they've turned their back on science and certainty. It makes a mockery of the consultation process by taking for granted the fact that HPMAs will be designated. Popeye Ewing must have fishermen's forearms to have ripped this document apart last night. Believe me, I've tried. The SNP motion potentially misleads the Parliament in suggesting the plans are in line with the EU, when in fact Scotland's already gone over and above their own MPA targets. They cite evidence from one area and entirely ignore contradictory evidence from another. The Bute House Agreement has much to answer for. It rides roughshod over the livelihoods of hard-working fishermen with a blatant disregard for the communities that they support and the science around the matter that we are discussing today. The arbitrary figure of 10% of Scottish waters for highly protected marine area designation has been plucked from the sky with no scientific backing or ecological justification to underpin it. The First Minister insisted that the government would not impose these policies on communities that don't want them. Now that line has changed to vehement opposition. Even if that could be defined or measured, it is evident that the government is moving the goalposts. There is no explanation of the problem that these proposals are trying to address or the goal it is trying to achieve. We don't even know how effective the existing MPA network is in supporting and maintaining biodiversity in our waters. There's been no impact assessment on how these plans would affect our coastal communities. There's been no feasibility study into how these areas could be implemented and enforced. Presiding Officer, my colleague Murdo Fraser has just discussed a recent inquiry. We learned that former ministers, senior civil servants and special advisers believe Scottish Government decision-making is rushed, unclear and unstructured, as we saw with the Gender Recognition Reform Bill. Presiding Officer, we are here again. To describe this policy as rushed, unclear and unstructured would be far too generous. But on the other side of this conversation, the fishing sector have taken their time to construct clear, coherent arguments against these proposals. Nonetheless, I think it is important to say that I absolutely understand the need to protect our marine environment. I'm certain that this is another point on which we can all agree. Yes.
Cabinet Secretary.
I'm grateful to Rachel Hamilton for taking the intervention. In March, her colleague Therese Coffey, the Conservative Secretary of State for the Environment, called HPMAs a vital way forward. She subsequently introduced them in England. How does she reconcile that with her remarks?
Rachel Hamilton.
The difference between the way that your government are approaching it, Cabinet Secretary, is that you are not bringing on the coastal communities with you. This document is a paper exercise that is an online process that has had no consultation with any coastal communities at all. The difference between the UK government approach is that DEFRA consulted with coastal communities and the fishermen even agreed on the sites that were proposed. No one gets this more than fishermen, Presiding Officer, because without good fish stocks, their businesses would struggle. As the former Finance Secretary said, sever the lifeline of fishing and you undermine the wider economy of coastal communities. She is right. And this is a clear sign of the need to work with fishermen on these issues, instead of imposing arbitrary, unevidenced restrictions on their activities. With sustainable fishing practices, our fleet has seen fish stocks rebound over the last 20 years. Plaice, hake, haddock have all seen their populations grow considerably in this time because of their own sustainable practices. And that is down to the hard work of those fishermen who know our seas best, not the result of top-down desktop policies, as we heard last night in Beatrice Wishart's debate. Our coastal communities have asked for the Scottish Government to reconsider these plans. The fishermen in these vulnerable, rural, fragile coastal communities need to be heard. Today, with this motion, the Scottish Parliament is presented with a clear choice. We can stand behind these communities, go back to the drawing board and work with them, rather than against them to protect our seas. Or we can press ahead with these unevidenced, unwanted and hugely damaging plans. We should be under no illusions. These communities are clear that a fishing ban is an existential threat, not just to their jobs, but to their way of life. And we have an opportunity today to send them a message that we have listened and we will support them. And we have a plan to do that. And we want to work with this government and all parties to make sure we can protect them and our oceans. And I believe our amendments reflect this. I believe that the amendments to the motion from Labour and to the Liberal Democrats show their willingness to do this, and I absolutely welcome their support to standing up for fishermen. And I'm sure there will be others on the backbenches who will also stand up for their constituents too. Thank you.